Good evening. Welcome to Street Talk. So we're doing the Get Out a Vote edition here because our primaries are coming up really quick, and even on both sides of the aisle, everybody has a choice to make, whether it's governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer, you name it, across the board. And this really sets the table for the general election. So if you don't like who's on your ticket, it means that you didn't go out and vote for somebody. So right now, I have a very special guest. I actually got his bumper sticker in the mail the other day because, yes, I am one of the people that did contribute to his campaign. So I have Ned Lamont.
Dominic, great to see you. We've been talking about it, we're doing it.
The endorsed candidate for governor, and I certainly gave him my vote when we were up. That was my very first time that I'd ever been up to the big gathering, so to speak. You got to remember, I'm newly christened citizen, so this is only my third year being a U.S. citizen. So I do try to get up and around and get involved with the people. And I know you are currently the endorsed candidate, and then the primary is coming up August 14th.
Correct.
So Tuesday, August 14th. And you know what? This is the first thing that you need to pay attention to, because this sets the table for our upcoming election. And I think it's important that we choose people that are going to be credible and be able to take the gauntlet and carry it across the finish line. I personally, I think Ned's one of those people that can be able to do it. So I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's a crazy time to have a primary, isn't it? August 14th, the very week of the year where most likely you want to go out fishing or hunting or something. And my God. That's when they want you to go out and vote. But we need you to go out and vote and pay attention to that primary because it's very important. You'll select the Republican and Democratic candidates for governor and the two major parties, plus the under ticket, of which there's some real battles going on.
There are. Now, I gotta ask you, because obviously the first question I ask if anybody is running is, why are you running? Most important.
I'm running because, A, I love the state. And I don't like to hear all the people bad-mouthing the state of Connecticut. I think the number one problem confronting the state of Connecticut is jobs. You'll solve a lot of budget issues. We'll keep young people in the state. We'll get the state growing again. We'll be able to hold down taxes if we start generating jobs the way we used to in many years past. I would be the first governor, really, in the history of the state who started a business and created jobs. And I think that's what you need. Somebody who can talk to small business, give them some confidence. We got our budget situation under control. Somebody who's fearless when it comes to shaking up how they do business in Hartford, streamlining services, but most importantly, giving you a sense of direction. That's what small business needs to start investing and hiring again.
Now, I think a large part of what we have to deal with up in Hartford is something that you've been involved with for quite a long period of time, because you served on the pension board for the state of Connecticut. So you know what we've been up against as far as our underfunded pensions, which go back decades.
Decades. And I shouted from the rafters when I was chairman of the Investment Advisory Council, which oversees the investments for our pension fund, that if we don't start funding the pension, you just can't keep putting this stuff on the credit card, because at some point it's going to come due, and it's 2018, and it is coming due. But I work very closely with the teachers and the state employees. They're all in the council as well, and to doing everything we could to help them understand how we were investing that money and how we could just get a little better performance out of that fund. Just an extra 1% of performance today is worth $350 million. You do that year in and year out, we can start bridging the gap.
You sound like another friend of mine from down your way, John Blankley. I had him on about this time.
I know Blankley, sure.
This time last year, and I know he had a lot of good ideas about investment, but he certainly talked about how we can make sure that we strengthen our position in pensions, and how what that's going to mean to us further down the line. And I bring this up because I know I hear a lot from everybody else. I won't go into specific names, talking about how, we're going to go back and we're going to renegotiate all this stuff, like with the different, plans and other things, and I'm going, these people really don't understand. This is not something that's on the backs of our current state employees. Their pensions are actually helping to fund a lot of the unfunded liabilities because a lot of the systems have been switched. And I keep getting this, oh, we're going to go back in. And I guess I remember my history a little bit. And I'm sure you probably do. John Rowland came in. He tried to do something with the state employees. He went against their contract. And some 10 years later, we had to pay the bill. $250 million that they had to scrape up with. It's good to know your history and where that comes from. So
I think the Republicans are dead wrong in this. I mean, what they say is we're going to tear up the agreements, walk away, and force people to, give up their pensions or much of their pension, as if it's the fault of that 70-year-old retired teacher who devoted her life to, teaching here in the Valley and had a contract, shook hands on it, operated, worked her heart out, and frankly, teachers don't even have Social Security. And so the fact that governors on both sides of the aisle, but you're right. I mean, Lowell Weicker left John Rowland $1 billion surplus. Not a dime of that went in to go pay for that teacher's pension. And here we are today, and we do have some obligations to these people. And so I'm going to support the teacher. I'm going to support collective bargaining. But bargaining, there is the word bargaining in there, so we're going to have to work going forward how we stabilize the situation. But stop blaming the people that do the work in this state.
And it's just, I guess it's one of those things that eats away at me. You know what? We made promises to people, and I'm assured at the time that was with contracts and other things back in the 80s, 70s going back. That was what was given to everybody all the way around. And it's if you worked in corporate America. My father worked for ITT. He got a pension. He got health benefits. I mean, I know things have changed over a period of time, and we're trying to hold up what's happened in the past from like the 1980s to say, okay, well, nobody gets this nowadays. Why are these people in such a place? And it was some Republican governors that cut those deals with people too. Anyway,
running for governor, we can fight about what happened over the last 8 years or 38 years, and they can blame some governors, and we can talk about others. But I've got to make sure that people focus on where this state is going.
And I think that's something. I guess I bring it up because you know what? It's when you give your word to something, or you give a handshake. When you tell the unions, this is what we're going to abide by. I think that's an important function as an executive. Because if people can't trust what you're saying.
I couldn't do business. I did business 35 years. I competed with these guys here at Comcast, to tell you the truth. But my word and my reputation are what kept a small company competing against a big brand name like a Comcast. And that goes for government as well. You got to honor your commitments. You got to look people in the eye and know that they can take you at your word. And I say it as a governor because I think the politicians have been lying to folks for many, many years. So they tell you we're going to eliminate the income tax and you're not going to have any cuts in services at all. I mean, come on, guys. We've heard that for a generation. You need somebody who's going to tell you the truth. Do everything we can to hold the line on taxes. That's darn sure. Streamline our services so we're delivering things at a better price for folks and give them confidence that we're doing everything we can to invest in the future of the state. I'm all going to be about education and our young people and focused on jobs because I think that's how Connecticut gets going again.
Now, I know I was listening to the debates last week, and one of the things that you spoke about was that you're going to be somebody who's going to go and talk to business. And I know you've done this already. You've been around to GE, some of the other major corporations. What sort of things are they looking for from us as a state to be able to grow where they're at?
So GE was very clear. After GE said, oh, we're going to Massachusetts, we're out of here, and all the politicians started doing the blame game, I got some of the folks from GE who led the search, and I got labor and business, and our political leaders on both sides of the aisle said, we're going to learn from this, not make sure it doesn't happen again. And GE told us three things. They said, one, we cannot find the next generation of technology-enabled millennials, young people who are ready to help us go. And if we can't find them in Connecticut, I bet we can find them in a big city like Boston. Two, they said, even if we can find these folks, they can't get to Fairfield. They can't get on the rail service right here, Waterbury to Bridgeport. They can't get to the office on time. And the gridlock is killing us. And three, they said, fix your fiscal situation. How you do it is up to you, but fix it so we get going. So the first thing we did after that, Dominic, was we did a workforce development study. We did talk to all the major employers. We said, what are the type of jobs you need over the next 5 years, 10 years? We work with our community college. We work with Naugatuck Community College, and we try and bring together the employers and the education facilities. So we're training people for those jobs. And look, I took on Dan Malloy 8 years ago. We had a feisty primary. I'm the guy that argued if we don't make big changes, we're still going to be in a mess. And we still are in a budget mess. But back then, people were lined up at the unemployment office. And today, there's some good news. You know, we have tens of thousands of really good jobs right here in the Valley. A lot of the small manufacturers are beginning to hire again. We better make darn sure I'm training people for those jobs. And that make sure these are Connecticut jobs for Connecticut people.
And I think what you say is correct. Education is the key, because we're no longer in the type of economy where you could walk out of high school and you could walk into a factory. Nowadays, they're expecting you, to be able to do a CNC machine. They're expecting you to be able to do calculations or figure out how to, work and compete in the smaller environment. The days of, where you had these big factories, that were churning things out, they're just not the same. And, I have friends, one of them who's running for Senate down in Milford, James Baroni, who, when he was a state rep, he advocated for having teaching kids computer language as a foreign language, so that they could start.
I think it makes a lot of good sense. We would be such a leader there.
They could start like in middle school with their education, because this is where we need to have the out-of-the-box thinking. This is where we need to be able to move forward and see that this all goes in together, because reality-based is a lot of jobs are being taken not by foreign companies, but by robotics and the cloud infrastructure. And if you're not the ones creating it, if you're not the ones creating those kind of jobs to be able to work in those fields, then
we're not training you. Shame on us, because that's our job. Is like, we don't need to do incentives and bribes to get companies to grow and expand here, but we ought to train the people so they're ready to go for these jobs. Career Academy right down the street in Waterbury, that's a role model. They are extraordinary. People are lined up. Those kids go out of there, they have a job like that, or they go on to community college or college. Hill House up in New Haven I visited, where the laborers provide a lot of the training. And I don't know, 30, 40, 50 kids every year go on and join an apprenticeship program. Up in Goodwin in East Hartford, Pratt & Whitney will pay for your laser welding certificate. They say, look, you go through this 18-week training program, whatever it is, you get that certificate, you're trained there, you got a job, and we'll pay your training expenses. So a lot of ways that we can bring down the cost or make community college free if we line it up with the jobs that we need.
And I guess that's the part where people don't understand, or they hear community college for free, that's something that seems out of the realm. But when you line it up with what the needs of the manufacturing are, or business, I think we're
the taxpayers can't do it all. We're sort of stretched, but I got to tell you, our competitors in New York and Rhode Island, community college is free or virtually free, and that's who we're competing against.
So now I always like to think, you've been an executive of companies. I always like to hear what kind of management style that people have going into this, because some people are hands-off, some people are hands-on. What sort of management style do you necessarily bring to the table?
That's a good question. I can tell you one thing, my door was always open. And I ran a technology business, but I'm not a technology guy. So I was surrounded by much smarter folks who had an engineering and technical background. And they explained exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it and how they were doing it. Then I had to explain that to the customer or the clients. And I think as governor, I'd be the same type of person. My door would be open. I'm a heck of a lot smarter with other folks at the table, and that includes labor, that includes Republicans, that includes small business. I want them there, knowing that I'll be fighting for them and help me make the best decision possible. I'll take the bullets if it's a tough decision. I understand what that is, and I'll hand out the credit to Republicans and Democrats alike, but I gotta get this state working together and working together in unison towards an honest budget. That's how we're gonna get this state growing again.
Now, speaking of experts in like the budget realm, is there anything that I know you've talked a lot about automation and other things. I know I come from a very technologically advanced family. We're all involved with different information technologies. Or my brother does laser optics, and my father actually he worked for ITT. He designed. He was the designer of System 12, which I'm sure you're probably somewhat familiar with.
Somewhat, yeah.
Yes. And so I know in planning out some of these things, I think sometimes people tend to forget some of the questions or problems that people might face. Like I say, I was helping out somebody fill out their redetermination. I work with people with brain injury, so I help them to do those sort of things. And we decided for the first time, we're like, okay, well, let's do this online. He's got a little bit of a complication because he has a special fund which was created, which is a Medicare trust. And I guess I didn't feel comfortable enough, because there was no box to explain that, to just be able to write that in and then put at risk his redetermination. So we actually used the paper forms and other things along those lines. So it's always important, I guess, when you look at the bigger picture, to be able to, I guess, add the human touch to all that goes into streamlining and other things.
Streamlining doesn't mean losing the human touch. Streamlining doesn't mean taking the human element out of what we do. It means helping folks help others in a much more efficient and thorough way. You talk about healthcare. I mean, everywhere I go around the state, I mean, it's people say the high cost of Connecticut, and it's okay. Maybe it's taxes, maybe it's tuition, but it's also healthcare costs. And last week the insurance companies announced another double-digit increase, and every day now you hear that the federal government and maybe the Trump White House is talking about cutting back on subsidies for folks on the exchange, many of whom depend upon this as a way that they can provide their health care. And it does save Connecticut a lot of money, too. But most importantly, if you're a mother with an autistic child, every day you live in fear that the state won't be there to help you take care of your child. And you need some help there because you're going to work 8 hours a day trying to provide for your family. So if you don't understand the heartache that people are going through, just hearing the discussions about how they're going to cut back. So I got to convince people, and I say we're going to do things better, we're going to do things streamlined, we're going to be innovative. That doesn't mean I'm cutting back on services you depend on. We're just going to do it better.
I think that's a really important fact that's out there. I know, especially for my family, I have a son with a rare disease. I'm self-employed. My wife doesn't get insurance through her small company, so we paid for the first few years on the healthcare exchange, and unfortunately for us, it's a roll of the dice as to whether my kid ends up in the hospital. One year it was like 4 or 5 times. This past year and a half, it's been none. But I know the prices on the exchange have gone up dramatically, and my degree, actually, I have a master's in healthcare administration, so some of this is not unfundamental to what I do. And I look at this, and I think this is people's major concern: is what's going to happen when that emergency comes down, or what happens with the family. And I know we've been a big part of the rare disease community, and one of the things that we talk to legislators about is that 40% of pediatric care goes to rare disease. Whereas if we can find out a way to be able to identify those things, and identify ways to help people with that, then the overall cost goes down dramatically. So I mean, even within healthcare, there are a lot of things that we can do, and I look at it as we as people in Connecticut, we're not just the voters. We're not just the constituents of services. We're the people that have to work together with government in order to be able to hold down the costs of many of these things. And I look forward to an opportunity when government is open to discussing what people's needs are, and willing to listen.
So one of my favorite thoughts in politics is Franklin Delano Roosevelt's famous line, "People don't care what you know until they know that you care."
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to healthcare, and when it comes to making some reforms, people have got to understand that at the end of the day, the health and security of the patient is paramount. And right now, coming out of Washington, there are a lot of changes that are driving up the cost of health care, and
Mm-hmm.
healthy people can option out, and the pool is getting narrower, and we're paying a higher and higher cost. And especially if you have a child with a pre-existing condition or a severe disability, they're putting more and more of that cost on your back. And you need a governor who at least says, I understand that, I understand what they're doing, and I have a way that we can fix it. But don't be afraid of change by the same token. That's my job over the next 4 years. Don't be afraid of change, but I got your back.
Oh, well, you were talking about the FDR references. That was much of his fireside chats, where the fear is what drives us into a black hole.
Fear itself, yeah.
Yes. It's important, obviously, being able to listen to people and realizing that, I get the distinct feeling that people on the other side of the aisle at times, just look at services and they don't see the face of the people that are behind them. So for me, having somebody who's a thought leader, not a thoughtless leader, is probably one of the keys that I'm looking for when I'm looking at who our next governor is. I'm hoping it's you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, these are people. We are better off for campaigning. I mean, these are not numbers. These are not a graph. This is not where we stand on some list. These are people, and especially for governor, every decision you make has a direct consequence to the folks out there. And I know that, and I understand that. And secondly, in politics, your reputation is really important. We started off talking about your word, and I said I never would have been able to compete in my little company unless we had a reputation for delivering on what we said we were going to do, and with a high quality product. And if you shortchange people in politics, you ought to pay a price for that, because your reputation for integrity is all you've got.
Now, speaking of your reputation, I hear you've taught over at Harding High School over in Bridgeport.
Yeah, I was a volunteer teacher up there. This is 20 years ago, Dominic, but I talk about it a lot because I hope it meant a lot to the kids. It meant a heck of a lot to me. Mm-hmm. And what I tried to do in this amazing high school that was having a tough time, and they invited me in because they had an accounting class, and the accounting class was boring, and students didn't really want to go. And they had a very nice, good teacher from Uruguay who could teach accounting as a technical thing. And they asked me to come in just once a week and see if I could help bring it to life. And I brought in the owner of Soul to Soul Restaurant, the founder of the Bluefish, and folks from the community who were, A, just amazing role models for these kids, B, who could give them just a sense of, hey, this is how I did it, and when I was your age, this is what I was dreaming about. And C, let me tell you about accounting. It may be boring, but it's like a report card, and it shows me how I'm doing at the end of the month. And to the 2 or 3 kids that maybe seem the most interested in the Soul to Soul restaurant operations, they got an internship that summer. So I've been a big believer in great neighborhood schools that are open to the community, where you get the ministry, you get the business community, you get the parents involved. So I'm taking my experience in Harding and hopefully taking it right up to the state capitol.
Well, I know inspiring our next generation is really what's key to helping them, but I think also helping to keep them around. I know I was at a campaign event for my friend who with his volunteers, and we were talking about what was important to them, and how to go out and advocate for that with legislators, and what you need to think of, and what's the timing of doing certain things. And it was interesting for me to hear like a diverse kind of background, because usually you think people who want to get involved with politics at a young age, they're edging towards what I do, which is human services type stuff and wanting to make a difference. But no, a lot of these kids were talking about like technology. They were talking about math and science programs, and these are all high school kids. And I was like, wow, I was kind of like a little bit taken aback. I'm like, maybe the millennials are doing okay. But it's that inspiration that really brings them forward. And I know when you ran your campaigns, I know certainly you stood out by saying things that maybe people didn't want to hear down in Washington. I know you in the past you were against the Iraq War, and I know that there's maybe a little bit of activist like
I was
streak
dead set
inside
against
you.
that war. I thought it was one of the dumbest decisions our country had made in a long time. I was a selectman in my hometown, not exactly a politico, but I couldn't get any of the usual suspects to run. This was back in 2006. We don't challenge somebody in our own party. I said, why not? If I think they're wrong, I'm going to stand up, and I'll do the same thing as governor. If I think my party's wrong, I'm going to stand up and challenge as well. And we won that primary, and I'm really proud we won that primary. And we went on, and Obama was elected. We ended our frontline role in the fighting in Iraq. I think it made Iraq more stable, and we were able to spend money and invest those monies right back here in our schools and our transportation, which is what we should have done. And I think you need a governor who's not afraid to make those decisions, stand up for what they think is right, and damn the consequences. Full speed ahead.
And I think that's truly important, because sometimes, I'm a Democrat, and there are times I disagree with some of the things in my party. I wish they would stand up more, and I wish in some ways that we could be better about coalescing around people at the end of the day, and realizing that these are the ones that are going to carry you further. And they're going to be the ones that listen to you, which is really important.
No, I need folks to get together. I may be a business guy from Fairfield County, but I understand labor. Labor has given me their support. It's a show of respect. I know the work they're doing every day. I know they're terrified that their agreements are going to go and they're not going to have any security. And I got to say, I'm going to be there fighting for you. But I say the same thing to the small business guys. I know exactly where you're coming from. I know that when the state can't figure out what their budget is, state can't figure out what the taxes are going to be next year, how can you plan? How can you invest? I know exactly the issues that they confront every day as they're trying to meet a payroll, and how hard that is. I got to find a way to find some common ground doing that, and I will.
And I think definitely, along the lines of what you talked about, that business leaders were looking for, I think they're looking to have our cities be vibrant, and figure out a way that we can keep and attract. I mean, let's face it. I know Boston has Harvard. We have Yale. You've gone to both. but we have, a big pool of opportunity in New Haven. I think we have a big pool of opportunity in Bridgeport. I think Stamford, I grew up down in Fairfield County, so I was there from like 76 to about like 1990. So Stamford has grown immensely, and I think, it's moved up the chain to Norwalk. But I think, finding a way to get, the big investments in Bridgeport and making our cities more vibrant is going to be key to
I got to
where
do
we go.
everything I can to hold down and bring down property tax costs in our cities. They're the highest tax areas around based on property tax and mill rate. You're absolutely right. Connecticut won't be great unless our cities are vibrant places. That's where a lot of young people want to be. Jobs follow the young people. That's where our transportation hubs ought to be, in Waterbury and Bridgeport and New Haven, so people can get around. More frequent rail service right along the valley here, coming in and out of Waterbury would be vital for that. That starts with transportation hubs in our city with some affordable housing around those hubs. And I say the small towns because you can't pit, we're a small state, you can't pit cities and towns.
No.
You want to preserve your open space. You want to preserve a lifestyle there. You want most of the development going on in our urban centers. You want easy access in and out of there for some of your work going forward. And I also say to the small towns, look, we can talk about high-speed rail coming out of there someday, but in the meantime, let's get high-speed Wi-Fi right in downtown Naugatuck and Seymour. So those young people who maybe only have to be in that city job 2 days a week, the other 3 days a week, they can work right out of the downtown there, have all the same internet access you can in Brooklyn, New York.
And I think these are the ideas, obviously, as somebody who's been in a technology-based company, truly understands and sees the need for where we go. And certainly, I know you've had a deep level of support from Mayor Harp, as well as, I believe,
Mayor Harp, Neil O'Leary.
Yeah.
He's doing a good job, I think, in Waterbury. And I love his police athletic league and how they're getting the kids together with the police. And at a young age, they get to know each other. That's what makes community policing at its best.
And
there's so much pride in Waterbury, too. I just love the inspiration is every day that city is coming back. They got a AA bond ready. My God, the other cities would dream of what's going on there in Waterbury.
Wow, that's actually a pretty big turnaround. I lived up there 10 years ago.
Big turnaround.
That is a huge turnaround. Wow.
And the spirit there. I mean, there's so much community spirit. And I need that for the state of Connecticut. What are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? Well, we're going to do as much as we can, but we need you to believe in the state as well. That's how we turn it around.
And I think that's a big part of being positive. I know it's easy to pick on the problems. It's harder to come up with the solutions, but it takes enthusiasm to actually implement and go out there and work with that. And I know you got some great people on your team. You got one of my favorites, Dante Bartolomeo.
Dante is amazing. But I'll tell you, people, you see the TV ads, and it's doom and gloom, and Connecticut's a mess, and gee, shuddered, But there's also a lot of optimism in this state. They know if this political class that has not done a very good job in Hartford State Capitol, if we can turn around that budget, I can guarantee you that we got a lot of businesses that are ready to break out. They're ready to invest. They're ready to hire people. And I feel that optimism as I go around the state. So I don't want a governor who sits around bad-mouthing the state of Connecticut for the next 4 years. I think you got to have somebody that helps you believe in this state.
Well, now, I know you were part of what brought up 1,000 new jobs to Hartford. Were you?
I was helpful on that.
Yes.
That's true. It was a major computer training company called Infosys, and they were about to go down the Northern Virginia, the Research Triangle in North Carolina, all the usual places they go. And a mutual friend introduced me to the head of Infosys, and I said, you gotta think about Connecticut. And they did some work at Aetna, so I said, let's go up to Hartford. And I tell the story about how I got a cab, got the guy, drove him up to Hartford, and by the time he got there, the cabbie had just been killing our state. They're bankrupt, can't get out of their own way, people are leaving. And I said, slow down, Ravi, come on up. We've got the business leaders of Hartford here. So we had Hartford Health and Stanley Black & Decker, the insurance guys. They just said, you're right. we can't find the trained personnel we need to bring travelers into the 21st century. If you were here, we would stay and we would work with your people. So they are announcing by the end of this year, the next few months, 1,000 people a year when they get going in IT training skills that are mean, Aetna, turn around the moving van. Start moving back to Hartford because the people are going to be here with the trained skills you need to hire and grow.
You know what? It takes somebody to recognize where it's important to be able to invest, and certainly you know, like you were saying with our transportation, and getting more rail service. I know I go back and forth with somebody else I know who's running for office on the other side of the aisle, and you know, he's talking about, well, why are we worrying about this over here when we have this over here? And it's because this over here in New Haven, up the corridor to Hartford, is just as important as what happens down in Lower Fairfield County, because our success is all interrelated. And that's the way that I always view it. You know, what's good for New London, you know, a big deep water port, putting a railhead to that so that they can ship stuff up to like Vermont, and, you know, we have better shipping come in. I mean, we are, you know, in an enviable spot. I mean, you might have Boston and New York where you have like all the big, you know, huge super tankers that can make it through the Panama Canal now. Now all the smaller ones aren't going to disappear. They're just going to need places that are close by in order to be able to utilize that. Bridgeport, New Haven, New London.
Get that Waterbury line going, the rail line. That would be extraordinary. Rather than every 2 hours, just back and forth, two-way traffic, a lot more frequent. That would just open up the valley. You know, Seymour, Derby, all along the way to Bridgeport, give you access to Stamford, give you access to New Haven, get some of those cars off the road. Those are the type of investments we haven't made in a long time. We've been just shortchanging the citizens of the state. And I got to balance the budget and start making investments in our future. That's education and transportation. That's how we get the state moving again.
And I look at from a standpoint our transportation. I'm not going to talk about the third rail in Connecticut right at the moment, but I think it's important that we look at what investments we have. And which ones we can and which ones are going to help our state and our transportation. Now, I know a lot has always been made about transportation with, you know, the money's being moved from one place to the other. Would you be in favor of like the transportation lockbox?
Yes.
The money?
I don't trust those politicians. If we get money, they're going to rob it and use it to pay some other operating expense. They did that on education. They've looted transportation on and off over the years. Look, you don't have to worry about it with me. I say the money's going to go to transportation. It's going to go to transportation. But I worry about it for the person that comes after me. So let's get a lockbox and make that locked.
You know, I think it's important because I don't think people feel badly when they pay for something that they know that that's where the money's going for. And I think all the way along, people who've paid for roads with gas taxes, you know, other things along those lines, if they know that that's where the money is going to, that's what's important to them, and whatever comes up afterwards or wherever we go. I know different people have different points of view about what to do with our transportation and how to be able to fund it. I think knowing that the money that we are putting aside for that is going directly to that is really critical.
I think people don't trust Hartford to spend the money in the most efficient and productive way. Mm-hmm. And as a business guy, I got to convince them, you're making an investment in this state, and I am going to do everything I can to make sure that investment does what we say it's going to do. That means, A, educating our kids so they're well prepared to be good citizens and compete in the 21st century economy. That means making sure our employers know that we got a community college system. We got 8,000 fewer people in it than 10 years ago. We got all these jobs that are unfilled. So I match those two together so you know that your kid's going to have a great opportunity for a good paying job here. And then some way to get around the state that's efficient. I mean, our location, Dominic, used to be our great advantage. New England,
Yep.
gateway to the Middle Atlantic, most beautiful shoreline in the world, a pretty good rail system in its day. And we've really failed to do what we got to do to stay competitive. We're still locked in the 1960s, and I'm going to change that.
Yeah, I think even just replacing some of the rolling stock that goes with the rail lines, or figuring out better ways to be able to do the signal systems. I mean, there's so much that we could do that maybe wouldn't cost as much as what people anticipate. The other big part of it is I don't think people realize that, a lot of money for these funding of these projects comes from the federal government. So, I mean, it's important who we send up with the to the federal government, as members of Congress that can be able to support our state.
We get hammered by the federal government.
I know.
We spend billions more down to Washington than we get back. Remember, this is a Washington that has $1 trillion deficit. That means there are a lot of guys who are getting a lot more money back, and we're getting billions less than we should. I need each and every one of our congressional delegation to fight every day that Connecticut gets its fair share. Whatever you think about the Trump tax cut, when they ended the deductibility or limited it for state and local taxes, that cost Connecticut another $700 million. This is money we cannot afford to lose. So every time you hear one of our congressional guys on TV, make sure they mention Connecticut and what they're doing to fight for Connecticut. I appreciate where we are on the big national issues as well, but I need folks fighting every day. And as governor, I'm going to have a grants office right next door. So I work with all the mayors, say, this is the type of thing we ought to be working on together.
I know one of the big things that I have down in my city, Milford, who you've got a good friend down there, I hear.
I do. Rich Smith, wonderful guy.
That we have down there, we have a great mayor who does a lot of that stuff. He looks for the grants. He looks for the ways to make our city efficient. He's got a AAA bond rating, and the businesses come in. And they do. And for the last 3 years, I think we're one of the fewest places around that's actually gone down in taxes and gone down in mill rates. So the things that you're talking about are the things that we live in Milford.
Ben Blake, the mayor there, has done an extraordinary job. He's a man of integrity. You can count on his word. That's so important to economic development. Then, as you know, every new job that's created in that town helps bring down the mill rate for everybody else. Not more taxes, more taxpayers. And it's the towns where the grand list is shrinking that the rates are going through the roof, and that's a vicious cycle in the wrong direction.
It's sometimes it's a tough cycle to break, but once you do, and you get going in a positive direction, it's like I say, it's like a snowball at the top of the hill. Yeah. It picks up momentum as it goes down. Now, I know one of the things that you push for, and certainly our friends in 1199 for personal care attendants we're able to finally get for their people, is creating a minimum wage that's around $15 like an hour. And I know this is important.
I do support that. We will get there. Won't get there overnight, but we're going to get there. But look, as a business guy, I think work should pay. And I think a lot of those nurses' aides are doing God's work, and they put their heart and soul into it every day. And the idea that they got to work 3 jobs and they still can't afford to take care of a kid is wrong. Their kid is wrong. So I am going to push for that, and as a business guy, I'll be in the best position to get it passed. And I understand the restaurant industry, and I know we're going to have to be accommodating of what's going on, but I think work should pay, at least up to that amount.
And also, it takes away from some of the things that we end up paying for as a state, as taxpayers. I mean, as they like to say, there's no free lunch. Even in the restaurant industry, there's no free lunch. Because if you shortchange people on the bottom end, then they're going to end up needing to be on some sort of aid or state supports in order just to make things meet.
I don't want government doing all that. I want the private sector taking a lead role there. And the way the workforce has changed, and just in the last 30 years, I mean, almost half the folks in our cities are single parents. Most of them are single moms, often single mothers of color. And they've got a couple of kids at home. And you better find a way to accommodate them so they can continue to work. Because as you point out, if they can't work, then that's the responsibility of the state. So for me, early childhood and daycare and things that you can work around, a $15 minimum wage, are all ways you allow people to keep working.
Well, you know what, and it brings me back to the point that, there's dignity in work. You give somebody an opportunity to earn a living where they're not in a position that they look at it that, they can stay on, like, Social Security or go back to work and they make more off of Social Security. That's kind of defeats the whole point of what, we're trying to accomplish with everybody. And, there's dignity in going to work every day and feeling like you've accomplished something and feeling like you're a participant in the system. Jobs are just, they're vital and they're important.
And I go even further. Respect the work that people are doing. I mean, sometimes we're sort of disrespecting the teachers. They're all in it for their pension, or that's a job I'd never want to do. Every job is important, and every job carries its own dignity. So, as a governor, A, I respect work, and B, I'm going to thank people for the work they're doing. I say that to the state employees every day. Stop blaming the state employees. They're keeping the state moving. I'm going to thank you for the work you're doing.
And you're going to make it easier for them to do their jobs, more importantly. And you know what? At the end of the day, they'll appreciate that just as much as anything else that goes in, because everybody wants to feel like they're productive. And having those systems in place to make them more productive are really going to be key.
Look, my company, we worked together as a team for 35 years. The technicians and all the folks, we were pulling hundreds of miles of fiber optic and twisted pair cable, and I thank them every day for the work that they did. And we worked our tail off, and then we had a big party when the the system turned on. And I need a little bit of that enthusiasm. I think our workforce is a little demoralized, especially in state government right now. Everybody's sort of blaming these folks, and they're showing up to work every day. And I want to thank them for what they're doing. Let them know we appreciate it.
And everybody thinks that they're overpaid. They're paid what is comparable in the private sector. And I hear people they talk about oh well, if we privatized everything. You know what? To me, there are some jobs in the world that are meant to be privatized, and there are some jobs that aren't. I know we face this because they privatized our social workers for DSS. This is one of my big fights that I managed to win, then lose right afterwards. But one of the issues that we had was that when I had a DSS social worker, I knew that they were always going to be there. And I've had some of my folks, because change is very difficult for people with brain injury. And we've had some of our folks where they've had 5 or 6 different social workers in a period of like two years, when prior to that they had one social worker for 10 years who would know them. So I think, like I said, it's that human touch that I think a lot of times people just like gloss over when they see dollars and cents and don't talk to
I
people
lost
about
both my parents in the last few years. And the home health care aide, they were like an angel to my parents. They were with them every hour of the day. They made my parents' last years on earth so meaningful and important. And my mother fell in love with this home health care aide. And she's not an aide, she's an angel. And you just got to remind people how important that work is. And when it came to my parents, I love those people for what they did for my mom and dad.
Thank you. And we certainly thank you for appreciating us. But then again, August 14th, you've got a primary.
I need you to vote on August 14th. Don't slack off on August 14th.
So I like to hand over the last few minutes so that you can speak to the voters directly, and you can say whatever you'd like to say, and then I wrap up and we're done.
Well, I'll go back to where I started. I'm a very different type of candidate. I'd be your first candidate and your first governor who started a business and created jobs. I'm also somebody who's not afraid to shake things up. I think you remember that where I took on my own party when it came to the war in Iraq. And he needs somebody who's not afraid to go up to Hartford and shake up the old way of doing things. But Dominic, as you remind me throughout this entire interview, shake things up, streamline things, make things more efficient, make sure the taxpayers know they're getting real value for their dollar, but keep the humanity in what each and every one of these folks are doing. And remind people how important that home health care aid is to somebody just like my parents and your parents. And that's the balance I've got to reach over the next 4 years. But I need your help. I have a lot of friends who are running on a primary day. Get out and vote. Don't take it for granted. And I'll see you in November.
Ned, I want to thank you very much for coming on here. I know we talked about it several different times, and I appreciate you taking the time in your busy schedule. But as Ned says, you know what? It's on us. It's on us as voters to be able to go out and speak to our friends about coming out and voting, telling them what you believe in and what you support, and where you're at with things. I know I do a daily Facebook post. Some people look at it political.
Hold up the bumper sticker. Let's go.
But I also, believe in speaking out about what's important to me, and your way of speaking out about what's important to you is hopefully you come out and you volunteer, you phone back, you knock on some doors, and you come out and you meet your neighbors, because when you get to meet your neighbors, you get to see the whole world around you, and you get to realize what's important to them, and that we're all interconnected. So with that, we can run the street.